Okay, I've started the recording. I will archive this session and you can get back to look at it anytime we have these kind of sessions, they will be recorded. I usually try to keep them to an hour or less. And as you can see by all the material these first couple weeks that you have, there's a lot of material to look through. There's a lot of videos we've put up there to try and explain some of the concepts a little more. Uh, the first 2 weeks I've set up, I don't have any written assignments for you to work on this week. So I wanted you to really devote your time the first 2 weeks on a number of the self-awareness assessments that, excuse me, that have been put up. I'm battling a head cold that started last night, so I apologize. So as you work through your these first couple of weeks, I've tried to ease you into the semester. And please, if there's anything you don't understand, please just get to me, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. So tonight, what I wanted to do was just offer a few thoughts on where we are starting this week on self-awareness. And then I'll give you some time at the end if there's any questions you might have. So why don't I share some slides on the concept of self-awareness. And as we're going through this, if there's any, don't be afraid to speak up. I'm gonna, if you remember from the introduction to the text, the material we're talking about in this class, and here are a lot of the skills we're going to be talking about. So much of success, managerial success, is going to be is contingent on you mastering or developing or being aware of many of the things listed on this chart. Emotional intelligence was talked about a lot. And that talks about how you do in life, how you function with other people. And there's a fair amount of research that relates success and capability with the things talked about with emotional intelligence. But the book is organized. There's been a lot of research around what are some of the fundamental skills. And when we talk about skills, we're talking about things that are behavioral and things that you can do something about, and that you can develop them. So this is not just opinions or attitudes, or it's not like me saying, oh, you've got to develop a better attitude, or you've got to change your personality. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about behaviors that all of you can do something about and you can develop and improve. And so if I had time, I would probably get you into groups to talk about skills, and you would probably identify these, many of them. And communication always turns up. And on the third week, I'll be spending some time on that, making effective decisions, defining problems, problem solving, the skill of delegating, as you move up. That's one of the things I've noticed that people have had a hard time with and coping with as they move up in organizations and have to learn to delegate to other people. And there's a lot associated with that. Building teams. Many of you probably work in teams. Many of them functional, many of them dysfunctional, I suspect. Here's one you don't think of a lot, but managing your own stress is real important. Levels, managing your stress levels, and that's one we get into pretty quickly. I'll for next week. I'll talk some on that. Uh, Motivating yourself and others, and setting visions, managing conflict. If you will notice, and I'll say a minute about this, you will notice that one big assignment for this semester is that I want you to pick one skill area that you would like to work on for the next 6 to 7 weeks. And let's say you might say, hey, I really need to work on uh, uh, maybe problem solving, or I need to I need to handle conflict better. I like to build, or I'd like to be more assertive in meetings. Think about a skill area, and as you do these assessments, some of them might come up for you. And I'm going to want you to develop, and I have a structured way for you to do this, a structured way for you to develop a plan of attack for the next 7 or 8 weeks. And I'm trying to kind of putting into practice some of the things we're talking about in the course. So it's a time to maybe work on something that, and here in a non-threatening environment, a time for you to work on something you'd like to work on in a guided way. If you'll notice here, self-awareness is highlighted. That is probably the single most important skill area. That's why I put a lot into assessments. Bringing to your, bringing into this discussion this semester where you stand. So when we talk about skill development in all of these areas, there's going to be an emphasis on where you stand in relation to each of these. And believe me, you're going to be stronger at some than on others. That's just the way we are. Self-awareness, one of the assessments I have you take is a personality assessment. Even though that isn't necessarily a skill, it's important to get a sense of where my main personality traits are. There are 5 big ones. Psychologists call them the big 5. So an awareness of your style, your values. This first chapter talks an awful lot about values. I'm not going into them in depth, but on the major paper, I ask you to identify for yourself what are the values that make you tick. And, in another way, do your perceptions of yourself and of your strengths and weaknesses, do they correspond with others? So, that's a lot of what we're dealing with self-awareness. These skills we're talking about, there's skills around self-awareness, around stress, around how you solve problems. I kind of moved some of these topics around a little bit. The third week, we're going to talk about communication. That's a skill that becomes more interpersonal. So a lot of the skills, like motivation, conflict, gaining power, and communicating involve other people. And then there's group skills. You talk about teamwork, empowering and delegating, creating visions. So that's kind of the categories all the skill areas fit into. But getting back to self-awareness, the enigma of self-awareness is that self-knowledge really is a prerequisite for personal growth. I mean, even the great philosophers, Plato and Socrates, talk about the importance of that. Know thyself. I think that was Socrates. So this is a prerequisite for growth. You can't improve. You have to know what your strengths are, what your limitations are before you can even begin the process of change and development. However, we kind of the enigma is we kind of don't want to hear about ourselves. We do and we don't. So we get uncomfortable with things where we're learning about ourselves. Well, because it might make us feel bad or inferior, etc. So how do we get beyond that barrier? Uh, and hopefully the way we conduct this course, uh, and the reason we use assessments is to try and get objective information and try and present this information in a way there's some psychological safety that's not threatening to you, where you can begin to objectively look at strengths, areas for improvement. All of us have them. There is not one leader I've ever met who is perfect. Many of the skills that are listed here are the opposite of skills that you're yeah, but I guess let me put it this way. If you tell me your strengths, I can begin to tell you what some of your weaknesses might be. In other words, our strengths are the source of our weaknesses. Uh, and so it's almost impossible to encompass everything. Uh, this concept of the enigma is this concept of the sensitive line. And it's the point at which you become defensive or protective when you encounter information about yourself that's inconsistent with your concept, or when you get pressure to alter your behavior, when people want you to change. When we cross the sensitive line, we shut down. We don't listen anymore. So part of what we're trying to do here is push back or push back that sensitive line and enable you to consider information that's both positive and negative, maybe. There's a concept I like called the Johari window, which I think is very, very important. Maybe a model for thinking about what I'm talking about. If you look at this model, how do we really learn that we're good at what we do? Basically, we learn that through feedback from others. You're not born knowing that you're a good leader or you're a good manager. You get feedback from others. So for us to improve, getting feedback is very important. Um, Getting feedback on the assessments maybe you're taking, being open to getting feedback. I mean, you're going to be writing papers for me, so you're going to be disclosing information. I'll give you feedback if I can. That's the other side of this Johari window. You get feedback from others, but your willingness to disclose information is also important in the process of growth. And it's that dynamic of getting feedback and disclosure. So if you look on these quadrants here, there's information you know about yourself and information that others know. That's our arena of interaction. However, there's that hidden area there. That's things that you know about yourself that I don't know. And it depends on how much you choose to disclose to me. There's the other side. There are things that I maybe can see in you that you don't know you see in yourself. And if you're open to get feedback, you can learn about things about yourself you might not know. And it's through this dynamic of getting feedback and disclosure that we learn about other areas of hidden potential. So that dynamic is a pretty important dynamic in terms of personal growth. It's also a metaphor or module you can use to think about how trust develops, how friendships develop. You know, you disclose information to me and accept feedback from information because you're trusting that I'm not going to use that information to hurt you. And you're also trusting that the feedback I'm giving you is honest. And it's that through that dynamic that relationships develop, that trust develops, etc. So uh, the dynamic for growth is also the same dynamic at work for building trust and relationships. So you're willing to push back your sensitive line when you get information that is verifiable, predictable, and controllable. So one of the reasons we use these assessments, and many of the assessments used in this course are verifiable. They've been validated and have been used. So some of the information coming back is information that I would encourage you to consider. And sometimes, and also we cross that sensitive line when we disclose and accept feedback. So that's some of the basic concepts on developing some of these skills. Research shows that managers who do not seek feedback and managers who only seek positive feedback have unrealistic views of themselves, and managers who seek negative feedback there. What I mean by negative feedback is not personally negative, but negative about maybe your behavior or how you do things. You have a more realistic view on things, and you are seen by others as more effective than managers who don't seek. If you seek feedback on how things are going, etc., people tend to have a much more favorable view of you. Maybe that's being, maybe I'm going to find a word for that. It's called humility. Research shows that managers with inflated self views are poorer, less effective leaders, and maybe suffer career derailment. So it's important to try and get a sense of congruence between how we see ourselves and others see us as managers or leaders. So in this self-awareness, we're looking at 5 big areas. I'm not going to go through the individual assessments. They're there. They're in the individual assessments. You'll find many of them in the website. I've also put links for you for all of them so you can print them. But there's an assessment on your core self-evaluation. There's one on there's some things on values. I don't really ask you to specifically take that assessment or report out on it, but I would recommend you going through that. In your major paper, I do ask you to identify key values. There's assessments around emotional intelligence, around your attitudes toward change. We look at assessment called locus of control, tolerance of ambiguity. And then there's an assessment around dealing with how you like to get information and share information. That's cognitive style. So those are just some general areas of self-awareness that we're talking about. And then when there's a lot of areas, a few assessments I have you take related to chapter 2 on stress, like type A personality and things like that. So that's really the bulk of the work for these first 2 weeks are reading about these assessments and getting a handle on them. Another macro concept I want to really highlight here, and coming out of all of this, is what I call it appreciating difference. All of you on these assessments are going to turn out very differently. Some of you are going to be more introvert, some of you more extroverts, some of you are better at handling task-related issues. each of you bring different strengths to the table. You're really all different, and sometimes uh, we sometimes ascribe negative characteristics to people who are different from us, uh, and that's meant by setting up distinctions. What we want to do in here is really come at it with the mindset of trying to observe differences and appreciating them, appreciating the capabilities, recognizing the capabilities of others who are different from us. And people are going to be different because you're each going to turn out a little differently on these assessments. And some people call that managing diversity, but I think it's much easier to think of it in terms of observing difference and then appreciating and recognizing how our different qualities and when there's section when you read they talk about values. Each of us from different cultures and around the world bring different value sets, and so how do we appreciate the difference in our value sets as opposed to setting up a distinction? When we set distinctions, it almost implies we're judging. So that's a real high end concept. I think it's real important in here because we are going to be different. Some of us are much more task oriented than others, and we might frustrate each other. So as we go through these assessments, and every chapter has them, we're going to start with the assessment on each of the skills, and part of that is appreciating how people are different with each of the skill sets. So I'm not going to present a long discussion, but if I had to, ask you about thinking about maybe the worst boss or coworker you've ever had. What did that person do that made you evaluate them that way? Or I think of the best boss you ever had or the best coworker. What did that person do? And by the way, bosses and coworkers are real important for our job satisfaction. I put this in the slides, but here's kind of some answers to the best and the worst. Got the job done without having to be managed or reminded, or helped coworkers when they needed a hand, or some of the weak whined and complained no matter what was happening, or broke virtually any rule that somehow made their work more difficult. Seemed to be always looking for something else, even if it wasn't better. First to leave for lunch, last to return. There could be a lot of different things. And basically, what we're trying to do in here is um, discover and associate those elements that are the best, making you one of the best. So, and then just some other thoughts. Why would we have a course such as this in business schools? A lot of your courses you're going to be getting in the MBA program are going to be more technically oriented and are very important. Your accounting, managerial accounting is very important. Some of the analytics, and how important analytics is today, etc. So why study this subject and things like this? Well, I put it back to, what do organizations want? What organizations want are job performance and organizational commitment. Probably every organization wants from you those two things. They want you to be performing at the best of levels, and they want some sense of commitment from you to what you're doing. I didn't use the word loyalty here. I said commitment, which I think is slightly different. And what are some of the individual things that make you or make people that work in organizations have these two things. Well, uh, job satisfaction, or how's their level of stress, or are their values in line, or what about their learning, their motivation? So these are all the things that help make people want to do their best and want them to be committed to what they're doing. That's why that's in a nutshell why I think it's important that, a lot of organizations, what's the most important thing? Is that the financial resources they have or the physical resources, or is it the knowledge decision making culture that's there? Really what makes an organization? I maintain more than ever in ever, I grew up in what we called we have all been growing away from the industrial economy to the knowledge economy or the service economy, whatever it is. In all of those, it's the human capital I think is the most important. And I think the human capital is the one that's the most difficult to replicate. So the question is it really the people that make some companies more profitable than others? I happen to believe it is. There's a lot of research out there. And I think the human capital is an organization that builds its human capital, makes it very inimitable, I mean, hard to duplicate. Uh, you you just have an extremely difficult time replicating the value of a solid workforce, collective pool of experience. In many ways, in organizations, it's the many small day in, day out decisions that make a difference. It's the culture that's created. So that's why I think paying attention to some of the topics we are here is very important. And organizational behavior practices are associated with better performance. Firms who valued the things we're talking about in here had a higher survival rate. Good, good people comprise a valuable research for companies. I remember having classes look at the top companies to work for, and in your fortune list or worker list, there are also some of the higher performing organizations. So those are just some of my higher end thoughts on all of this, maybe more the macro and why we're worrying about some of the skills we are, why this notion of self assessment is so important. And I think you'll find interesting a lot of the assessments I have you going through these first couple of weeks. We'll talk a little more about this next week. We'll get a chance to talk about all the assessments a little bit and how you're reacting when we talk about the stress stuff in the stress management chapter. So why don't I wrap my part up and throw it open to you for maybe some of your thoughts about the approach in the class here and maybe what you'd hope to get out of this. Uh, and then we'll end it. Anyone have any thoughts they'd like to share? Don't be shy about what's been said here or any questions you have. Chris, you unmuted and I'll let you go.
Yeah, I just think I'm looking forward to taking all the surveys and then doing a deeper dive into the results of them uh, and through the chapters and the reading, self-reflect on the areas within my own personal and professional development where I feel that I have opportunities. I mean, one that this jumps out at me is conflict management, which I assume most people don't like to have to deal with a difficult employee or things of that nature with conflict. So for me, that's an area that I'm going to focus on. because I feel uh, others around you will look to see how you're dealing with that conflict and judge you on that as well. Just not that individual that you're dealing with, but it's amazing how many people from around the periphery are, really watching. All right, let's see how this plays out and how he deals with this. So that's just some early thoughts of mine.
Yeah, you'll get a chance as we look through some of this. If I can think of it, I'll give you a list of some topics other students have picked for themselves to work on. Uh, some of them are things, some people wanted to work on some stress management things. Uh, some of
Yeah.
them you can maybe make a great deal of success on in 6 or 7 weeks. Some other skills are much more long term, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, wellness in the workplace is very important. That's a big topic, especially in healthcare with nurses and going through the pandemic and coming out on the other end, people are still impacted by it. So, but thanks for allowing me to share my thoughts.
All right, Chris. Anyone have any thoughts or any thoughts and questions or what you're hoping to see in here, or you're saying, "Oh my God, I didn't expect this." Yeah, Monique.
Yes. I feel like I guess I am hoping to get some information on managing stress. When I used to work at Applebee's and inside fast food, it was kind of easy to manage stress. But then when I transferred over to Progressive and I have a 1 year old now, I don't know where my skills went, but they aren't here anymore. So I'm hoping that I can like get a lot of tips about managing stress so, it can benefit me at home as well.
At Applebee's, you were in a job that dealt with what they call high emotional labor,
Yes.
where you had to be nice to people when you really wanted to tear their heads off.
Yes, that is correct.
Anyone have any thoughts? Any others?
I would say managing time and stress too, and also setting goals and articulating vision.
Okay.
So that was one that stuck out to me. That I'm.
It will talk. Those are things we'll talk about and get to. Thanks, Malika. You want to quickly introduce yourself, Malika? We introduced ourselves at the beginning.
Oh, hi. My name is Michaela Wilson.
Sorry, I can't read.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. My name is Michaela Wilson. What else did we say? I'm sorry.
Are you where you're working? Where you went to school?
Oh, okay. My name is Michaela Wilson. I went to undergrad at LaSalle, 2018 to 2022. I currently work at Fox Rothschild as a legal assistant and a records clerk. And yeah, nice to meet you guys.
That's great. Thanks.
No problem.
All right. Anyone else before we sign off? Any questions about anything in the course right now that maybe is confusing you or?
Yeah, Professor Bruce, I just had a quick question. So the assessments that we printed out, you want to see that we've done them? Do you want us to fill them out and then kind of scan them and send them to you, or is that just for our own?
Okay, let me say a word about the assessments. You don't turn the assessments into me.
Okay.
I have there's one assignment. I'm not sure if it's due next week or the week after. It's kind of a worksheet where I have you go through all the assessments and put uh, and you interpret the results for yourself, where you put your various scores, and it's like a spreadsheet. I do that for your benefit as well. So,
Okay. That makes sense.
so you'll see on that worksheet. I also tell people as you're looking at these assessments, I kind of look at them from a holistic point of view. You may agree or disagree with the results. This doesn't, they aren't sacrosanct. It doesn't mean, but there may be other assessments you took in life. You get feedback at work on evaluations. are there certain themes coming out for you in terms of your strengths or areas for improvement? That's what I'm interested in. And so I don't need to see your individual assessments, or if you have trouble interpreting them. One of the things I ask you to, there's a really good burnout survey that I've included here that we use. That's kind of a national burnout survey that people find very helpful. And so some of them might be confusing in terms of doing them. So if you have questions there, but I don't need to see the actual surveys. I just when you do the big paper for the course, slightly after midterm, I'm asking you to almost write a strategic plan for yourself. What's your mission? We call it maybe a U Inc. paper, U Incorporated. What's your mission? What are some of your values? What's your vision for? And then a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses. Uh, you know, what investments are you making? So you'll read through that. You'll see what I'm talking about. So you'll be doing that paper. Then on the skill I ask you to work on, I'm going to ask you to turn in a contract. I'm going to ask you to identify a skill, but there's also a lot of sub portions of that. How you're going to do it. And you might even want to use AI to help you with that. And in fact, I might give some examples. You'll see that assignment in the contract I ask you to fill out. And then at the end of the semester, your final paper is a reporting out of how you did with that skill. Where were you at the beginning of the semester? Where were you at the end? How had you improved? What do you still need to do? That kind of stuff. And then there's weekly assignments associated with the topics. About the fifth or sixth week, I'm going to try and split the class into 3 groups and see if you can find a time to meet for about an hour. I have a group decision making that I would like for you to do as a group of 6 or 7 people to focus on some group dynamic stuff. So that's going to be the only thing where I'm going to try and require 6 or 7 of you to come together, but I'm going to let you choose that. I'm going to be breaking you into groups. But I'll probably try and start working on that next week and give you all opportunities to pick a time. And what happens is I have a group decision-making task where we videotape you and I go through a lot of issues around group dynamics. So that's what we do for the group and team module. And then I have you analyze the group that you were in. All right. Any other questions before I sign off?